it's like, how the heck are you going to convince a helicopter pilot? You sound like a crazy man right now. Sure, the dog burst through a wall, but...
But he was a crazy man with a gun.
Yeah, fair enough. But
I forget even who the helicopter pilot was. Was he ever seen before? Or was he a completely new guy that just flew in?
He was a completely new guy who just flew in, if I'm not mistaken. And he could have been there before. I don't really remember. I doubt it.
He wasn't.
But I'm pretty sure that the helicopter pilot, he just flies in from some other Norwegian base that had heard the distress signal that was being sent out. And they're like, "Oh, Lars, what are you doing here? Get the helicopter going now! That's not a dog! That's a thing!"
You almost sounded like Arnie there.
Well, yeah, that's because the guy kind of sounds like Arnold if Arnold was speaking Norwegian. I will say Lars is a badass. The character Lars is a badass, and he's the only redeeming thing about this movie, is the fact that Lars, the bearded Norwegian guy that doesn't speak English, and at the very end he has a high-powered assault rifle, and he gets in a helicopter and chases after a dog.
He's barely in the movie.
Yeah, and that's why I say it's the only redeeming quality of the movie. The rest of the movie is crap.
And I agree. Like I said, I possibly hate this even more than you do, because I even hated that ending. I don't care if it like made the movie more faithful to the sequel. At that point, no. Okay, my problems. First of all, okay, I know they were going to be using CGI and stuff. People who know me know I generally hate CGI. I prefer practical effects. I was okay with the fact they were going to be using CGI. But the monsters didn't really work for me here, and we were shown them way too often, way too often,
way too often, and way too early.
Like a cheap stripper, it showed the goods way too soon.
I mean, no.
Okay, let's talk about the actual things that were similar to the original. Here's everything we know about their Norwegian base according to the original. Mac, the doctor, I think his name was like Copper, and...
Hopper, I think.
Whatever his name was. The doctor that gets his arms bitten off in the original. Yeah. And someone else, I forget who else went. Leave a comment on the video if you know who the other guy was, because I genuinely loved the first movie. However, they go to the Norwegian base. It's burned down, and it's you know, burned down and everything, and they go to the radio room, and there's a guy with his wrist slit and his neck slit, you know, holding a straight razor in his hand, and he's frozen solid. They go to another room. There's a huge ice block with a huge hole in the middle. There's of course before this, there's the Norwegian guy with the assault rifle, you know, shooting out of the edge of the helicopter with his assault rifle
and throwing grenades.
And there's also a body of a thing that looks like its head is split in half at a weird angle.
And they did set that up.
And all of that stuff is in the movie. The base, it looks like it's burned in the same exact places. The ice block, the room with the ice block, it looks like the room with the ice block.
Did they encounter the axe in the wall? In John Carpenter?
Yeah, they encountered there was an axe in the wall, and they encounter an axe in the wall.
They leave an axe in the wall.
They leave an axe in the wall in this movie, and there's a guy, and he's sitting at the radio room, and he has slit his wrists and neck. But here's the problem: all of this was an afterthought. Like the guy who slits his wrists, we don't see him doing that. We just, at the very end of the movie, during the post-credits sequence, we see the guy with his wrist slit. The last time we see him, he's alive and in the radio room, just looking around, all terrified.
Did they even use an actor to do that, or did they just pose a mannequin that they made look like him? Because I really couldn't tell.
It was the actor. It was an actor, and
okay, then that was way too much makeup they put on him, because he looked like a mannequin to me.
Yeah, well, he was supposed to look frozen, but what are you gonna do? Now, the Norwegian thing, as the fans of the first movie like to call it, that's actually two people. It's not one person whose head is just split at a weird angle. It's two people now. It's the head Norwegian and the head American's assistant. The head Norwegian becomes a thing, and he kills half the cast, including the research assistant. The way he kills the research assistant, he crawls up next to him and he rubs faces with him, and their faces merge together. And then they become like a walking spider thing, and in my head I was thinking Spider-Man, Spider-Man.
Although to be fair, the monsters in John Carpenter's did have kind of a spider motif to them.
Well, that's because
this thing looked more like a crab, if anything.
And I actually did like the fact that that they kept the spider motif.
It didn't look that much like a spider. It looked like a crab.
Here's one of my problems though with that bit. It looked to me like it was at will separating bits of itself to go off, because its hand, it just jettisoned a hand. No reason to have it do that. In John Carpenter's thing, when the head melts and it becomes kind of that head spider with the
Norse spider,
it did
it to survive.
It did it to survive because Mac had just lit it on fire, but the head wasn't burning yet, so it jettisons the head so that piece of it will survive.
In this one, they're just skitter off. In this one, two guys are just carrying it, and I'm gonna dislodge my arms now, and I'm gonna have them attack everybody.
Yeah, I never got the feeling that it could do that it would do that. It's sort of like if that lizard that will lose its tail to get away from a predator, skank. Yeah, if it felt like if that thing would do that to as a hunting mechanism, like just jettison its tail and toss it out there just to lure something or to go attack something. It doesn't do that. I always viewed that ability as more of a defensive mechanism than an attack. In this movie, it used that mechanism as an attack.
Yeah, and he uses it a lot. He jettisons his arms off a lot in that 1 30-second sequence. But once he merges together with the research assistant, it's... No, that's... In the original movie, that was obviously just one head that had been split in half. Like halfway split in half, like in the process of transforming. This one, no, he's already the thing monster. Looked nothing like it, but it was there, so kind of no.
It didn't work.
Didn't work.
No.
Dog thing is still there, but he shows up at the very end. Lars, which his name was actually Lars in the first movie, which I liked.
You could barely tell that though, because they're yelling in Norwegian, and even if you turn the subtitles on for John Carpenter, all it says is yelling in Norwegian.
Yeah, that's why you look online to see the translation, and it's the other helicopter pilot is yelling and yells, "Lars, what the hell are you doing?" And Lars yells back, "Shut up, Peter, P-E-D-E-R. I'm going to stop this," and that's the problem that I had. Peter dies in this one. The other helicopter pilot is... I looked at the credits. His name was Matthias. I'm like, what? No. Peter is supposed to be the guy, because they both had huge bushy beards, because they're from Norway and they're Vikings, and they have big bushy beards. And really, Lars barely had a big bushy beard. He had, beard all over his face, but it wasn't big and bushy. But all the things that connected this movie to the original, pure afterthought. Just pure afterthought. This movie's not about the Norwegians. It's about an American paleontologist that the Norwegians bring in. And it's about an American helicopter pilot that gets stuck there. the Norwegians, they're just there because they have to be Norwegians, because the first movie says that they're supposed to be Norwegians there.
I think I give it a little more credit than you do. A lot of the stuff they did in the middle of the movie, yeah, the ending was a tacked on afterthought, but in the middle, I got the feeling they were trying to set everything up. The two-headed monster, that I thought that one was, it was really trying. I just think they got the exact effects of it wrong. But I was willing to let that kind of go because I thought they were thinking they could try to do it better than what they were doing with the models and the practical effects from the first one. They didn't, but they thought they could.
That was one of my problems with this movie. I felt throughout the whole thing, like, this was, like you guys said, it felt like a shot-for-shot remake. For me, it felt like this guy was saying, like, I'm going to disguise this as a prequel. Well, like I said, like we've been saying, it felt like a shot-for-shot remake, and there was just, like, every single part that was actually a reference to the original felt like an afterthought. Now, what pisses me off even more, though, was that they actually did have a couple of good ideas that they implemented horribly. I liked the fact that in the Norwegian base, they figured out an entirely different way to test to see if people were a thing. Apparently, the thing cannot replicate inorganic material, which kind of makes sense when you think about it. So they figured out that when people would get infected, like their fillings, or like, say, like maybe, I don't know, a watch. So one guy's case, it was a leg brace. Like, those would be, like, left behind as evidence. I thought that was brilliant. The problem is that when they figure this out, it's after they've already basically copied the original freaking movie by saying that, oh, we could test for blood and stuff like that. What I was hoping they would do in this movie was not even really bring that part up. Like, I mean, you got two different, like, when you consider the original, you got two different bases. There's no way in hell that two different groups of people of different nationalities are going to be coming up with the same flippin' ideas. That was a huge problem I had with this movie. The shot-for-shot remake thing, it doesn't, I mean, these are supposed to be completely different people. I mean, how do you screw that up? I mean, if they had it, they should have just gone with the fillings thing. That was a brilliant idea.
Another question, why is it that two military bases in the middle of the Antarctic have military-grade flamethrowers? This is something that I have...
They're not military bases, they're research bases.
Yeah,
civilian research facilities.
Non-military bases. Why do they have military-grade flamethrowers? That's a question I had from the original, but I let it slide. But when they do it again, I'm like, no.
And the problem
They
is...
should be using Molotov cocktails and cheap shit. They should not have access to flamethrowers. But then again, maybe you could say that this base was more militarily equipped because they had grenades and assault rifles.
But at least they introduced the flamethrower. I have no idea where they pulled the flamethrower from. In John Carpenter, you have a scene. Hey, Matt wants the flamethrower.
You want what?
Yeah, I like that scene. Now,